Welcome to Tale Recap Plus. The first person seen in this movie is the contractor, a guy named James Harper who is in the Army's Special Military Forces. James Harper and his wife are very happy together. They have an 8-year-old son that James loves very much. James has recently been rehabbing and getting better after having surgery on his badly hurt knee while serving in Afghanistan. After a few days, James got a call from military leaders who told him that he had been medically released with honor. Not only that, but he won't get any retirement pay either because, according to the company, all the money was used to pay for his medical care. Even though James didn't want to leave the Army, he couldn't do much to keep the job. James went home and told his wife that he had lost his job and wasn't getting any money for being laid off. He looked lost because he didn't have enough saved to stay with them for a few months while they paid their bills. Brian tries to calm him down by telling him that everything will be okay and that they will work it out together. That night, while James was fixing the roof on the house, Brian told him that Mason, his best friend, had killed himself. Mason was James's best friend in the service. He had been laid off a few months before James did. Brian became very scared and thought that James might do the same thing. But he embraced her right away and told her that he would never leave his family, even in hard times like these. When James went to Mason's funeral the next day, a guy named Mike came up to him. Mike used to be James' boss in the Special Forces military unit, but he quit the military for the same reasons James did. He didn't like his job. They still get along well, though. So Mike asks James to dinner with his family. Another thing was that they hadn't seen each other in a while because Mike had moved. James went to Mike's house in the evening to go to a dinner request while they talked about their own lives. Mike and James talked and watched a football game after dinner. Mike said that he works for a private company that pays more in that talk. James still hadn't found a new job at the time. So when he heard this, he asked him for help so that he could join the company. In the past few days, he has also been told to pay his bills and other living costs right away. Mike brought James with Rusty, the boss of the company where he worked, the next day. Before he hired James, Rusty told him that most of the tasks for this job were very dangerous and came with a high risk. Because he was broke, James had no choice but to take the job and deal with all the risks that came with it. From what Rusty and James said to each other, we know that Rusty, like James, used to be in the military but chose to leave and start his own business. Another thing he said was that all of his company's tasks are approved and backed by the government. This meant that James didn't have to worry about getting caught while doing the mission. Rusty gave James his first job, which was to spy on someone in Berlin for a few weeks after he joined the group. When James got home, he told Brian that he had found a new job that paid well but needed him to work abroad for 2 weeks. Brian had no choice but to agree. After that, James took a plane to Berlin and stayed at a hotel that Mike had set up for him. A woman named Katia came into James' room a few hours after they got to the hotel and said she was one of Rusty's guys. There, she tells James to spy on Sutherland, a biological expert who is known to have worked with terrorist groups to make biological weapons. After getting all of his gear ready in the evening, James went right to his first task. He keeps track of everything Sutherland does at home and in the lab where he does study. James spent days following Sutherland and getting all the information he needed. Then Katia sent him a message telling him to go to the camp. James met up with Mike, Katia, and another co-worker named Bobby when he got to the offices. Mike tells them that Sutherland is making a biological weapon that is very dangerous and will sell it to big terrorist groups. To do this, they need to kill Sutherland and take all of his biological weapon study data from the lab. But they had to be careful because the lab had a security system that was linked to a nearby police station. If the Berlin police caught up with them, they could always run into the forest and through the river caves. That night, they got all of their tools and weapons ready before finally leaving together for their goal. When James and his team got to the spot, They started to sneak up on the guards and kill them one by one so they could get into the lab building. They finally found Sutherland after searching all the rooms and told him they would take all of his study data if he didn't. Then Mike tells Bobby to move all the information to their computer, and James is told to kill Sutherland. When James heard this, Sutherland kept pleading with him not to kill him because he was just a scientist doing study that would save millions of lives. He also asked James to help him hide a copy of his study data in a bank vault that his wife was the only one who could open. But James didn't believe Sutherland's words, so he killed him right away with a poison shot. Once James was sure Sutherland was dead, he set fire to the lab and made it look like he had died in an accident. But just as they were leaving the lab, 2 police cars surrounded them. This meant that the cops and Mike's troops had to shoot each other. Claudia and Bobby unfortunately died in the shootout, and Mike was hit in the leg with a gun. James picked up Mike right away and took him to the bush so they could hide in the tunnel in the river when he realized things were getting worse. Mike and James took a short break in a safe place after diving for a while so that James could treat Mike's gunshot wound to his leg. In fact, he had to give Mike blood right away because he had lost so much and was in very bad shape. After Mike got better, they were going to go back to base right away, but James' knee pain came back so quickly that he couldn't stand. He told Mike to give Rusty the study data and that he would follow up with him after his leg healed. Mike had to leave James and go to Rusty first to give him the info so that their mission could go well. Before he left, Mike told James to go to the Sutherland hotel and wait there until he came back to pick him up. After a few hours, when James' knee felt better, he did what Mike had told him to do and went to the Sutherland hotel. There was a message in the room telling James that Mike would be there in 6 hours with a passport that Mike had given him ahead of time. But Mike still hadn't shown up after a long wait, and James thought something was wrong, so he left the hotel. Then James calls Rusty to find out where Mike is. Rusty tells James that their plan has been leaked, and police are now looking for them. He said Mike never came back to turn in the study data, so he thought Mike had died on the way. Rusty then told James to let him know where he was so he could send someone to get him. But when James sees Rusty's men, he gets a bad feeling and decides not to go with them because he believes Rusty killed Mike. His guess turned out to be right. Soon after James turned around and went the other way, Rusty yelled at his men to kill and arrest James. James ran away from Rusty's men when he heard several gunshots, fled under the bridge aisle after a fierce chase, and killed 2 of Rusty's men. James had time to ask who sent them before the man died. He found out that Rusty had told them to kill the man when they picked him up. James then used the man's cell phone to send Rusty a short message that made him think he was dead. James took a break in the subway stop after a long, tiring trip and thought about what he should do next. Straight away, he remembered Sutherland's words and the copy of the study data he had hid in the bank vault. James went to Sutherland's house the next day and told his wife to get a copy of the study data from the bank. At first, Sutherland's wife said no to James's request, but when he threatened to hurt her son, she had no choice but to do what he said. They went to the bank vault to get the info, and then Sutherland's wife gave it to James. As soon as James got the data, he went to see what study Sutherland had done. He seemed surprised when he saw that Sutherland was just a normal expert after looking at the data. The second group was working on a vaccine to fight a dangerous virus that was spreading around the world. He plans to give the vaccine away for free to anyone who needs it. But some people are planning to steal the process of making the vaccine from him to get rich. When James learned this, he chose to use the passport that Mike had given him earlier to go back to the United States. James goes to Mike's house when he gets to America to tell Mike's wife that her husband has died. But Mike is still living, which James didn't expect. This makes James think that he and Rusty plan to kill Mike. From behind, James sneaks up on Mike in the morning to find out what his real plans are. But Mike must have known this, because he attacked the people who had been following him all day right away. Rusty told Mike that James had died on a previous trip. so he looked shocked when he found out it was James. That's why Mike didn't pick him up at the hotel like he said he would and went to America by himself. Rusty was the one who played a joke on them both because he never meant to hurt James. When James finds out that Mike lied to him about the main goal of the mission and the study that Sutherland was doing, he almost kills Mike. Mike tells James not to go home because Rusty will hurt his family if he finds out he is still living. After hearing that, James chose to kill Rusty and his men because there was no other way to end this. Mike feels bad about James, so he plans to help him break into Rusty's house. Tonight, Mike lies and says he wants to see Rusty, while James breaks into Rusty's house through the back door. All of Rusty's men were shot one by James and Mike until a fierce gunfight broke out. Once Rusty's men were gone, Mike and Rusty shot each other until they were both dead. After that, James went up to Rusty, who was already dead, and punched him in the head without saying anything. Once they were done with their plan, James ran to save Mike and take him to the hospital, but he died on the way because he was so badly hurt. The next morning, James burned Mike in his car to get rid of the clues before going home to see his family. James plans to leave America with his wife and son to start a new life after getting back together with his family. The lesson we can learn from this movie is to never abandon people who have done a lot for us. One thing we can learn from this movie is to never betray people who have done a lot for us. Bye. Subscribe for more videos like this, turn on notifications, and leave a like to help Nation.